guys, my name is Jo Rogers, and today I'm here with Chris Ruby. Hi, Chris.
Hey.
Chris is a virtual CMO, so he's a Chief Marketing Officer, and he supports startups and, I guess, well-funded startups to create their marketing plan, right? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, Chris, so that people understand what you do and how you do it?
Right. So essentially my background is I've come a long history of working with SaaS software companies that operate in the financial services sector. So companies that sell into banks, asset managers and hedge funds, either data or analytics platforms. And in my capacity so far, I've done lots of sales roles and lots of marketing roles. And then eventually that led to, more leadership style marketing roles for a number of different firms. I've progressively moved from larger firms to smaller and smaller firms. And what I do now is I work largely with rapid growth or early stage startups, the kind of firm that's generally between kind of 10 and 30 people, that some funding, that's starting to get some traction, and that's trying to put together a real professional marketing program. And I generally go in pretty hands-on and help them put together the team that's going to get them where they want to go from a marketing perspective.
What is it you love about those businesses? Why have you gone from the big boys down to the small boys? What is it that's missing in that journey?
It's just really interesting because you're working with the people who are creating the businesses from the ground up. You're dealing with founders. You're dealing with people who are really hungry to create something new. Oftentimes it's generally not something that exists in the market. So there's this new concept, there's a founder story, there's a background of sort of how they came to this conclusion that the market needed X, whatever X is, and now they're trying really hard to bring it to market. And the focus, the drive, the energy, the passion that comes with that is really, really cool, and it's really energizing. And when you can bring, the experience of having seen how your firms scale up, and you can apply some of that to a smaller firm, it's really powerful.
Well done. This is my first time I've managed to keep myself on mute whilst continuing to talk. Do you find that when you go from, because this concept of kind of bringing the big boy marketing concepts, things that we use at the corporate level, to the SME space and the startup space, is something that I'm really familiar with. There's a lot of changes you've got to make in organization, the structure of that, because this doesn't quite fit into this, does it? So how did you manage that? Was that something you naturally were able to do, or has that taken time?
I think that I'm naturally a hands-on person. I'm quite comfortable sort of getting in the weeds, rolling up my sleeves, getting in on the technical details of things. And that helped me with the larger firms to really understand the mechanics and to also understand the limitations. One of the big things that comes up is that larger firms have teams of people to do things. You go to an event and there's one person that does logistics, and there's somebody that's doing the front door, and there's somebody that's doing the speaking, and there's all these different people running around. And you go into a startup or even sometimes a scale up, and there's maybe one person. Quite often marketing isn't even somebody's full-time job. Maybe it's the PA to the CEO who's assisting and basically running everything. And so as you start to do that, you start to look across all these disciplines and you go, okay, how do we bring these things together? And in order to do that, you've got to optimize a lot more. You've got to think very strategically about what you do because there's limited resources. You've got to focus on using really efficient pieces of software, and you've got to bring in freelance experts. You're not going to be able to go out and hire that whole team that's going to do all those different things. You're going to need to bring in strategically individuals at certain points in time who could come in, help you with something, and then move on. You're going to need an SEO person, you're going to need a designer, you're going to need a social media person. They're all going to come in and fit in different ways at different times, but you're not going to be able to hire them all full time.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely, as a small business ourselves, the hardest thing. It's hard to find that right team and find the right fit. I think we kind of managed that at the end of last year, and then, circumstances have shifted somewhat this year. But when you find that team, it takes a while to gather that team together and to find the right fit, because you can have the right writer, but just with a wrong, like you just don't necessarily, like the chemistry has to work and the leadership has to work. Certainly from my perspective as a kind of owner manager, I know nothing about marketing. I know what I think should work, but that doesn't actually mean that it's going to work. Do you find a lot of that with your kind of smaller businesses, that there's the founder either getting in the way or adding extra value, as I like to say?
I think it's really interesting, because I think obviously founders know a lot or they wouldn't be founders. And they're also, extremely good at getting things done, at moving very quickly, at understanding new concepts very rapidly, and at assimilating lots of different pieces of information from lots of places. And I think founders often know probably more conceptually about marketing than they often give themselves credit for. The challenge is that the devil is in the details. And a typical founder is, at least in my experience, is going to probably overlook some of the detail and assume certain things are easy that aren't necessarily easy, or make an assumption. For example, one of the things that I've seen repeatedly is that small firms think that they can hire one do-it-all marketing expert to get everything done end to end. And
that would be so good. That would be so good.
That'd be great, right? And and the challenge is that's just not the reality. The phrase has been coined that marketing is often T-shaped, or that a good marketer is T-shaped. And what that means is you've got all these different categories that go across, that you need to know a little bit about each one, but that at some point you're going to go deep on a couple of those things, right? So someone like myself, right, I'm very good with automation platforms. I'm pretty good with content. I'm good at getting technical and in the weeds on certain things, but then I'm going to understand, okay, how LinkedIn ads or Google ads or PPC campaigns work. Yes, I understand conceptually how they do it, but if I'm going to execute those campaigns, I'm going to get an expert in. Or if it's social media, I'm going to go and get somebody who's really, really good at doing social media engagement, listening, etc. And designing, for example, I'm not the person who's going to pick up InDesign and create something beautiful, but I'm going to go and find the person who does. And so and everybody you speak to that's a marketing generalist probably has a profile kind of like that. And then there's going to be a lot of really good freelancers out there who are going to be very, very good at one or two specific things. And the trick as a startup marketer, or the real challenge, is to figure out what are the things that we need to do and how do we coordinate them effectively to get what we need done. And, in doing that is often about hiring freelancers and collaborating across different individuals, across time zones. Remote is standard.
Yeah.
It's interesting looking at what's happening in the world right now, where everyone's like, oh, okay, we've got to go remote, and what are we going to do, and how are we going to do this? And I just think, well, yeah, but we've kind of been doing that for years. I mean, for the last 18 months, I was working with a firm where the headquarters was in Chicago. The CEO pretty much lived on an airplane. We had a couple of people in New York, a couple of people in London, and my freelance team was spread all over the place. Quite a few of them I never even met face to face.
Right.
Found them online. I met with them like this digitally. We worked across regions and time zones and locations to effectively deliver our marketing campaigns. And I think anybody who's in marketing kind of knows that already. And it depends on where you are in business, to what extent you're already comfortable working in a remote world.
It's interesting, isn't it? Especially when you're in the kind of tech world. Now, it's not just about the startups in the tech world, but in that world, I mean, this is not working from home. This is just regular remote work. This is just regular day at the office, right?
Yeah.
And I think for you and I, that is the case. Things do change because everybody's doing it. So I guess I actually feel like it's more helpful, because I know that I can say, hey, do you want to join a Zoom call? And everybody knows what Zoom is now. Whereas previously, when I'm like meeting with clients, they're like, oh no, I'd really love, let's meet face to face. And that doesn't happen too often. So Yeah, I'm with you. And then I think that's for many of us, that's been the case. We've been working from home. This is our day to day, but with big teams, nationally or internationally, depending on the project that you're working on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Even when I was working at American Express, a lot of that was remote because everybody's in the States and you're working here, and it may be different technology, but I think, yeah, this way of working has been around for years. However, many people are just picking up fresh. How are you finding the new working from home, your new version of working from home? Because
New version.
yeah, it is.
Well,
It's goofy, right?
yeah, it's different. It's different. I mean, you know, my old version versus my new version. My old version, at least I had between, you know, 8:39 in the morning until between 5 and 6 in the evening, where I could really get focused. Now I'm actually homeschooling at the same time. So it's
Wow.
a whole different exercise in optimizing your time, knowing how to get in the zone quickly, getting some things done, and then constant interruption of, oh, okay, I need to teach a lesson on equivalent fractions. What are equivalent fractions? And what does that mean? And how do I teach that? And then, okay, now I've got to teach it and get my 8-year-old sorted and off to the races. And okay, now I need to go back to whatever piece of work it was that I was working on. And that's a big shift. You know,
What's your favorite subject to teach?
probably, I would say probably the natural sciences or anything that has to do with, you know, technology, engineering, natural world. Like, you know, one of the things I like to do is put on, what's it called? One Strange Rock, for example. It's a documentary series. It's all about planet Earth. It's hosted by Will Smith. It's really well done. And that's just one example. What I'll do is I'll put that on the TV, or I'll put it on a Zoom call and share it with a couple of my daughter's friends. So there'll be 2 or 3 of them on a call, and we'll watch a section of the video and then pause and go back and say, well, did you understand this? And what did you think about that? And there are various concepts that come up that you can then go into, and you can start talking about rainforests, or you can talk about, you know, the solar system, or there's all sorts of different offshoots. And it's interesting because, you know, kids that are growing up now, they're really accustomed to a high quality, high definition, cinematic experience to grab their attention, you know, and so you're providing that to them, which gets them into it, gets them excited, but then you're stopping along the way and going, all right, but you thought that was really cool because it looked great on the screen, but did you understand what was happening? And then you start to see all of the curiosities and the questions and the things that come up. And that's really interesting because you're teaching them a broad array of disciplines kind of within the context of their own curiosity, which I think is really cool.
How amazing. That's actually giving me chills because I'm thinking like the word curiosity, I think does not seem to me, and I loved school because I was a complete geek with it, but curiosity was not really what I experienced. It wasn't like I was curious about things. And I think that's amazing that you're able to kind of, I don't think you can instill curiosity. I was going to say you instill it, but you're bringing that out of them, and you're being able to, with a task, I think, having this forced upon you, how do you feel about it, being a teacher dad?
It's mixed, you know. What I've found is there are some elements of it that I really, really like and really enjoy. I love that I spend more time with my daughter. I love that she's learning, if you want to call it the new way of work. You know, the old way of work being punch in, punch out. You work from 9 to 6, you go to a location, and then you go home. And I know, and you know, as people who've worked in freelance environments or built businesses, that you can be way more effective in way less time if you don't have the constraints of a 9 to 5.
Based on results, I say. That's like based on today we're doing this. Once that's done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's results focused. And there's this concept of, I must work between this hour and this hour, and I must be productive for all of this time. And the reality is that's just not humans. We don't work that way. And I'm really productive early in the morning, not so much in the afternoon. Somebody else might be productive late at night and useless in the morning. And knowing how to distribute the work that you need to do across the day, and knowing how to have the occasional moment where you go, you know, I'm just not on it right now. I'm going to go for a run and do something different, or go for a bike ride, or go do something else and come back to this a bit later, as opposed to being forced into that structure, which is something I've learned at being a freelancer, but my daughter hadn't had a chance to learn yet. And now she's learned.
I go to school and
yeah.
School between 9 and 3, and then yeah, absolutely, that's incredible.
You know, now she's, if something comes up and it's like, okay, well, this isn't working right now, I'm like, just leave it.
Yeah.
Go get your paints and do some artwork, because that's what you love. And then later in the day, we'll come back to the fractions. You know, it doesn't matter. You'll still get it done. And so she's learning that. Listen to my body, listen to my mind. How am I feeling? What's going on? Is this a good time for me to be doing this activity, or should I postpone that until later? And it's not that you're gonna not do it, because it still has to get done, but that it doesn't have to get done right now.
It's not the time right now. You know, somebody was talking to me about this, literally saying how much, even just me looking at the beginning of my day and saying, right, what can I do today and what can't I do today? A lot more living in the moment. And that's what I've gained from being a freelance, I guess, not just working from home, but just having choices, having that choice to say, no, this is not going to work for me today. My head is not in it. I'm not in the game. I might be in it tomorrow or later this afternoon. I know it's got to get done. The adrenaline might kick in then. Right now, it is not possible. And yeah, wow, what an amazing, that's a real life lesson for kids to be learning at the moment. What a gift. Amazing. I wanted to ask you, yes, you said about going back into productivity mode. You're like, okay, I'm in homeschool mode. Then you're like, go back into productivity mode. What's the shift, or what are you telling yourself between that and that? Is it the same thing? Like, okay, got to get it done. Let's get it done now. Or is it something else? What's the belief that's changed for you that's making things more productive?
I mean, I think it's a belief that's probably been more reinforced as opposed to that's changed, which is that I can have very productive, sort of call it a sprint period of time.
Right.
And that can last anywhere from a half an hour to a couple of hours. And I need to use those times really effectively to make sure that I'm doing the most difficult, challenging tasks at the moments when my brain is really on fire. And also when to step away. You know, for example, I was working on a piece of copy the other day and I was really struggling with it. And I just said, right, I'm going to leave it. And I just left it. Next day, I had breakfast, I'm in the shower, and it came to me. And my daughter's like, what are you doing? I come running out of the shower, my towel, I grab the laptop, I'm like, don't talk to me, I gotta go sit down. And 15 minutes, my laptop, you know, and boom, it was done. Like the thing that I had struggled with for an extended period of time the day before just came out. And so I guess the moral of the story is by stepping back and saying, okay, I'm gonna just leave this, let my brain do its thing, inspiration will kick in. And having the freedom to do that is so crucial, especially if you're doing anything that's creative.
That's so interesting, because that's not something I learned for a long time. And even kind of doing the work that I do, that there's a time for certain things. You know, first thing in the morning is time for some things, and last thing at night, sometimes before I go to bed, it may be time for other things. Knowing that the right time will come, and then suddenly I'll be like, I'm inspired. I've got to do this video. I don't want to do the video. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
What? Just waste of time. Just wait till it feels right and do it then. I love it. I wanted to ask you about the shift between, so for you, what you've seen and experienced in that kind of going into the freelance, because you went from corporate and you've kind of gone down, you're seeing down the scale, but it's kind of across, isn't it? It's gone towards, you've gone, what changed for you in stepping out of that corporate world and becoming a freelancer? And then tell me a little bit about that cycle of freelancing. Like we were talking about the kind of like you go from this to into the, you know, tell me about that.
I can do that. Before I dive into that, I want to make one last comment just about the
Yeah.
previous iteration, which is an interesting one that I've had with my daughter, but that I also think applies to anyone, which is a discussion around how you work and why it's important. So I
Ooh.
recently had a conversation with my daughter about flow states and being in the zone and what that's like and what it means, and putting it in the context of the things that she does. You know, she's an artist at heart, and she will go for hours where there's paints and stuff flying and mess making, and she's creating, and she's totally in it. And so for her, I explain, okay, that's flow state, that's in the zone. And when I'm in the zone, this is the types of things that I'm doing. And so by having a discussion up front and explaining, this is when I'm in the zone and this is what I need, and can you point to me when you're in the zone and this is what you need? So there's a language around it. So like if I come in to her or vice versa, and she just looks up and is like, I'm in the zone, Dad. And I'm just like, okay, cool. I'm not going to interact with you. And so I think it's so important in home-based environments, or where you're working in close proximity to a lot of people, or even in an office, where there's a language around these things, and that people know how to, without being rude, just say, like, I'm on something now, and if you break my flow, it's going to be really hard for me to come back to it. And I think that's really important.
Very powerful. That's a powerful parenting tip right there. Like,
Yeah.
no, I mean, some of these things you learn so far, so much later in life than kids are learning it now, that almost it becomes, for me, it feels like an adult concept, an intellectual concept that's a lot further down the line. You know, like, you learn it when you've gone for so long being out of flow that you go, oh, there's a state called flow. Oh, right. Wow. An important place to be. Oh, I really enjoy talking or speaking or whatever it is. That's really great. That doesn't even occur to me to teach children that. So that's, really, really powerful. It's great. It sounds like you're learning a lot about you and the way that you parent and the way that you interact with your daughter at the moment.
Yeah. And I mean, I assume that's true for all parents. I mean, nobody, none of us is getting out of this without some challenging lessons. And, it's not without its frustrations. So, but on, your topic of the cycle of a freelancer. So, what's really interesting, and anybody who's done this will know this story, which is, you go to school, you get a job, you get a better job, you make the money, you do the thing, you're doing it for somebody else. Somewhere along the way, you go, hang on, I don't really like this for whatever reason. Maybe it's the job, maybe it's the role, maybe it's your boss, maybe it's the subject matter, whatever. There's a whole list of reasons. At some point, the step is where someone says, well, hey, if I worked on a freelance basis and I charged X on a daily basis, I would be able to earn the same amount of money. And so you quit your job and you go out and you start doing some freelance and you charge X. And then you quickly realize, or maybe you thought about it beforehand, but I think a lot of people don't realize it until later, which is, okay, it might be your day rate, but what about vacation days, holidays, healthcare, parental leave? What about marketing and all the time you have to do? You spend a lot of time trying to find your next customers and trying to find the right customers, and working for ones that maybe you shouldn't have worked for, and then realizing that actually maybe that wasn't worth my time, and so the next one I'm going to choose more carefully, and all of this stuff. And you realize that that amounts to, I don't know, anywhere from 20 to 50% of your time. So that means you've actually got to charge a lot more if you're going to earn similar money. And so there's this whole, push-pull thing that goes on for a while. Some people get it better than others. It depends a lot on what the market rate is for whatever it is that you were doing versus what you would have maybe got paid on a full-time job. And quite often there's a big discrepancy there. Some things are higher value than others. Some things are more commoditized. And then knowing how to market yourself is really hard. Personally, I feel very confident when it comes to sitting down with somebody who's got a piece of technology or a data set and they want to sell it into a financial institution, I can really work with them and help them figure out how to position it, how to talk about it, how to draft the sales scripts and the marketing copy and all that stuff. But then when it comes to marketing myself, it's much harder to do, you know, because you're like, well, what am I really good at? And all the self-doubt comes in and all these other things. And it's different when it's somebody else's challenge, you know, and I think that's hard. And, you know, even the best marketers, when it comes time to market themselves, struggle in a way that maybe they wouldn't struggle if they were working on a client concept, you know, for all sorts of different reasons.
It's much more personal when it's yourself, isn't it? It's not just about what can I do, but like, should I be doing it that way? What are the rates? How does this all work? I can relate to that as well. It is and it's funny to hear a marketer say that, but it makes a lot more sense because I'm the same with the legal side of things. For me, I can tell people, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, do this, make sure you're very clear. And, you know, some of the biggest issues are the things that I would tell other people never to do. But of course, because the emotion's in it, you're like, oh, I should do this. This is a good idea. I make sensible decisions. Of course, you know, you can't help yourself. So yeah, I can relate to that. What then happens? So, because another thing that I hear a lot of people say around the freelancing world is you think you're going to have all this freedom and money. And actually, it's kind of the opposite. You think you're going to be free, like, oh, I'm not going to have a boss, so I'm going to have all this time. And actually, your time gets eaten up. And, you know, it takes us back to our last conversation about the efficiency and how we're working changes significantly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
and you get better at that in time, right?
You do. And it is the best personal development I think I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
Painfully good at showing you where you're really good at things and where you're not so good at things, where you're in your flow.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. And taking your own advice, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What would you, final couple of things. And I think I'll talk really about the guys I usually work with. So these tech scale-ups, startups, people that they're not quite at the point, or they may be at the moment where they're like, hold off on bringing any marketing officer on board. What can they be doing during this time now, during lockdown, to support themselves and to kind of raise their marketing game before they bring somebody like you on board?
I think one of the most valuable things that founders of founding teams can do is to work on their own content capabilities, is to get the ideas and the discussions that are taking place inside the organization, within the product team, the debate that happens between management and product, and the stories they're hearing from customers, and get that stuff down on paper or in print in some, or even just recorded verbally so that a copywriter can pick it up later. You know, the founders are innovators, and founding teams are incredibly intelligent, and they see things in the world that other people don't see. And they take those things for granted, and they assume that other people see what they see, and the reality is that they don't. You know, if other people saw those things and had the tenacity that those people have, they'd be founding those companies, but they're not. You know, that's why founders are like pioneers. You know, there aren't of them out there who are successful, and it takes a special breed of, you know, intelligence and a lack of risk aversion and a few other things to make a successful founder. But those ideas are really interesting to people. You know, if I can think of some of the founder conversations that I would have quite often that would be very brief, but, you know, I get a phone call, he's between meetings in a taxi somewhere in Manhattan, and he's rattling off, you know, and recounting something that just happened in the last meeting. And there's a 5-minute conversation that's incredibly valuable, intelligent insight, that if you can capture that, turn it into print and get it out, whether it's a LinkedIn post or an actual blog post if you have it, those are things that people need to hear, because what you're doing is you're demonstrating founder intelligence, understanding of the market, understanding of the customer problems in a solution-oriented framework. And what we need to be doing today, or what all founders need to be doing at any point in time, is building trust, building rapport with their prospective customers. And particularly in the world that we live in right now, where everything is remote, one of the most challenging things to do is build trust and rapport. You know, if you think about a typical salesperson, it's all about FaceTime with customers. And right now they can't get any FaceTime. You know, it's the meeting, but it's also the chit chat that happens on the way to the lift after the meeting.
Right.
You know, it's the conversation with the guy in the lobby or the woman in the lobby who came down to bring you upstairs to the meeting. There's a couple of minutes there. We're talking about the kids, the football, the weather, or whatever. Or maybe there's, oh, this person who's coming into the meeting, let me give you a couple of tidbits. Yeah. You know, that stuff doesn't happen on Zoom.
No.
And so you've got to find a way to recreate some of those and build that trust. And the way that you do that is by being honest about who you are and what you're thinking about. And it can be short videos, snaps of video. It could be short blog posts. But also that then forms the foundational ideas and concepts for much bigger pieces of content. That might be ebooks, that might be research papers or otherwise. And I would say that's one of the #1 things that people can be doing right now. You know, not focusing so much on, we need leads in the funnel right now because we need revenue so that we can show traction so we can get the next investment round. It's let's use this opportunity to build trust, rapport, community, so that when things start to come back online, these people know exactly who they're going to call when budgets open up.
Awesome. That is so helpful. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. How can people get in contact with you?
Find me on LinkedIn, just Chris Ruby on LinkedIn, or find me on my website, chrisruby.com.
The Director of Champions, LinkedIn. Thank you again. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for your homeschooling tips. I mean, I don't have any kids at home, but I kind of wish I did. Like, right, I'm following that. Thank you, everybody that's been watching. If you are enjoying our series on SME stories, then please do subscribe down here. And if you want to hear more from Chris, go and find him on LinkedIn. Chris Ruby is his name, and he's the Virtual CMO. Otherwise, thank you guys for joining us, and I will look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.
Thank you.